Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. Trump claims Modi agreed to halt Russian oil imports. Concerns rise about Russia's energy strategy. Trump's concerns surround Gaza and hostage situation. Political and humanitarian issues dominate. Trump authorizes CI operations in Venezuela. U.S. intelligence activity increases in South America. European nations counter Russian drone threat. Russia's drone capabilities pose a growing risk. Judge halts Trump's planned federal worker layoffs. Legal challenges continue regarding Trump's policies. Supreme Court grapples with Voting Rights Act. A key case tests voting rights in Louisiana. Chinese data breach allegations cause political fallout. Serious concerns about data security in China. French PM Lecornu survives. No confidence votes. Political instability persists in France. Trump unveils Arc de Trump monument plans. Controversial project announced by Trump. Syria's Sharaa meets Putin in Moscow. Diplomatic engagement following Assad's fall. Raila Odinga dies at 80. Kenyan icon and political leader passes away. Tensions escalate between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban. Regional instability increases. Zion Church crackdown signals religious persecution. Growing concerns about human rights in China. The digest of Sudan's children caught in war's devastation. Humanitarian crisis deepens in Sudan. Trump tariffs trigger decline in Indian exports and trade disputes impact economic relations. Trump claims Modi agreed to halt Russian oil imports. Recent reports detail a significant assertion by former President Donald Trump regarding a commitment from Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to cease purchasing Russian oil. Trump stated that Modi assured him India would no longer buy Russian oil, a move he characterized as a big step, aimed at pressuring Russia to end its war in Ukraine. This claim followed Trump's criticism of India's continued reliance on Russian crude, which he viewed as enabling the conflict. The Indian government, however, has expressed doubts about Trump's account, stating that discussions regarding Russian oil purchases are ongoing. A Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson confirmed that India prioritizes stable energy prices and diversified sourcing, but did not directly acknowledge Trump's assertion. India remains a significant importer of oil and gas, and its continued purchases have been a point of contention between Washington and Delhi. Trump's claim comes amidst a broader effort by the former president to exert pressure on both China and India to halt their support for Russia's energy sector. He announced a 25% tariff on Indian goods in August, linked to the import of Russian oil and gas, further escalating trade tensions. He believes that if India stops buying Russian oil, it would significantly accelerate the end of the conflict in Ukraine. India's reliance on Russian crude is driven by its burgeoning economy and large population, making it the third largest global oil consumer. Despite concerns raised by the U.S., India continues to import Russian oil at a discounted rate. The situation highlights the complex geopolitical dynamics surrounding the war in Ukraine and the global energy market. The U.S. Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, communicated an expectation to Japanese Finance Minister Katsunobu Kato regarding a similar halt to Japanese oil imports from Russia. The UK government has also implemented a price cap on Russian crude oil, aiming to disrupt the flow of funds to Russia. The ongoing debate underscores the strategic importance of energy security and the challenges of isolating Russia economically. The situation is expected to continue evolving as international relations shift. Trump's concerns amidst Gaza ceasefire and hostage returns, recent developments surrounding the Gaza ceasefire agreement, and the return of Israeli hostages have triggered heightened concerns, primarily centered on Hamas's adherence to the terms and the potential for renewed conflict. President Donald Trump has expressed reservations, stating that Israel could resume military action at his direction if Hamas fails to uphold its commitments. The core issue revolves around the delayed return of the bodies of 8 deceased individuals, including 4 recently executed, which Hamas claims is due to difficulties locating them amidst the extensive rubble and debris resulting from 2 years of conflict. Despite U.S. assurances that Hamas is diligently working through mediators to locate the remaining bodies, Trump remains skeptical, emphasizing the urgency of the situation and the potential for escalation. The agreement, outlined in Trump's 20-point peace plan, stipulates the immediate return of all hostages, living and deceased, within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting the terms. Amidst the hostage returns, violent clashes have erupted between Hamas and rival groups, including an incident involving a public execution, further fueling concerns about instability. Trump has previously warned Hamas to disarm or face consequences. The 20-point plan envisions a future where Hamas doesn't govern Gaza, which would be demilitarized and monitored. The U.S. is actively working with mediators to ensure the remaining bodies are recovered. recognizing the critical importance of fulfilling the agreement's terms. The situation is further complicated by the ongoing violence and the potential for Hamas to engage in further operations. Trump's administration is also focused on broader regional stability, including efforts to resolve the conflict in Ukraine. He expressed optimism about achieving peace in the Middle East and between Russia and Ukraine, acknowledging the complexities of these challenges. He also addressed criticisms of the media, expressing a desire for greater fairness in coverage. The situation in Gaza remains delicate, with the U.S. playing a central role in facilitating a lasting resolution. Trump authorizes CIA operations in Venezuela. Maduro denies regime change. That recent developments reveal that U.S. President Donald Trump has authorized covert CIA operations within Venezuela, aiming to curb drug trafficking and challenge the Nicolás Maduro regime. Following this authorization, the U.S. has conducted multiple military strikes on suspected drug-carrying vessels off the Venezuelan coast, resulting in the deaths of 27 individuals. These actions, justified by Trump as targeting illegal flows of drugs, are intended to pressure Maduro, whose legitimacy is internationally contested. Responding to these developments, Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, the recipient of the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize for her efforts to preserve democracy, has called for increased U.S. support to facilitate regime change. She views Maduro's leadership as a criminal narco-terrorism structure and explicitly urged Trump to award himself the Nobel Peace Prize, citing his efforts to resolve global conflicts. Machado's call for intervention aligns with the U.S. administration's assessment of Venezuela as a safe haven for terrorist organizations and a key transit point for illicit activities, including drug, gold, and arms trafficking. She highlighted a 2020 FBI report estimating 24% of global cocaine trade passes through Venezuela, despite the country's substantial oil and gold reserves. Trump acknowledged the CIA authorization, stating it stemmed from concerns about drug trafficking and Maduro's actions. He defended the strikes as a necessary response to the tragic situation in Venezuela. Following the news of Machado's Nobel Prize, Trump stated he spoke with her, describing her as very nice. Machado, who has been living in hiding since disputed elections last year, expressed fears that Maduro would attempt to harm her, citing the regime's willingness to employ any means to maintain power. She remains a central figure in the Venezuelan opposition, advocating for a transition to democracy and demanding greater U.S. support. The situation remains tense, with heightened U.S. military presence in the Caribbean and ongoing concerns about human rights abuses within Venezuela. European nations intensify efforts to counter Russian drone threat. A coordinated international response is underway as European nations bolster defenses against Russian drone incursions, driven by a series of attacks targeting energy infrastructure and border states. NATO and the European Union are prioritizing the development and deployment of counter-drone systems, recognizing the evolving nature of the threat. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte announced the implementation of integrated systems to detect, track, and neutralize aerial threats along the alliance's eastern flank, simultaneously seeking to leverage Ukraine's experience. The EU is formulating a drone wall project, aiming for full operational capacity by the end of 2027, though concerns exist regarding potential overlap with NATO's efforts. This initiative focuses initially on bolstering the defenses of eastern EU member states, but has broadened to encompass potential threats across the continent. Alongside this, a significant portion of the response is directed towards supporting Ukraine's ongoing defense. Several NATO countries have pledged contributions to a U.S. scheme providing weaponry to Kyiv. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth urged further participation, stating that no free riders would be tolerated. Discussions are ongoing regarding the potential provision of long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, a move that has drawn a strong warning from the Kremlin. The escalating conflict has prompted a fundraising effort, with projections for Ukraine's total military support reaching $6 billion by 2026. Simultaneously, the international community is grappling with the economic consequences of the war, including sanctions targeting Russian oil and the disruption of global energy markets. The situation is further complicated by shifting geopolitical dynamics, with the U.S. increasingly assertive in its support for Ukraine and a growing willingness to impose costs on Russia for its aggression. These developments underscore the urgency of the response and the determination of Western nations to sustain their support for Ukraine while mitigating the broader implications of the conflict. The ongoing dialogue and strategic adjustments reflect a complex and dynamic international landscape. Judge Halts, Trump's planned federal worker layoffs, a federal judge in San Francisco, has issued an emergency order halting the Trump administration's plans to lay off approximately 100 federal workers during the ongoing government shutdown. The ruling, granted following a request from several federal worker unions, asserts that the administration's actions are unlawful and politically motivated. Judge Susan Ilston determined that the administration was exploiting the lapse in government funding to disregard existing laws and regulations governing workforce reductions. The judge's decision stems from concerns that the layoffs, initiated last Friday, were driven by political considerations, specifically targeting agencies and programs favored by the Democratic Party. The order temporarily prevents the administration from proceeding with the planned layoffs and issuing further notices to affected employees. Prior to the court's intervention, the administration, through Office of Management and Budget Director Russ Vought, had projected that the layoffs could potentially reach north of 10,000 individuals. Vought stated the administration intends to aggressively reduce the size of the bureaucracy, encompassing both funding cuts and workforce reductions. However, the implementation of the REF process has been marked by significant errors. Initially, around 760 employees at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, were mistakenly notified of impending layoffs, a mistake the agency is now rectifying. The administration's initial projections are being challenged by the legal action. The judge's ruling underscores the legal challenges posed by the shutdown and the administration's attempts to circumvent established procedures. The case represents a significant setback for the Trump administration's strategy of using the shutdown to force personnel reductions. The administration's initial projections of 10,000 plus layoffs are currently suspended pending the outcome of the legal proceedings. The ongoing situation highlights the legal and logistical complexities of managing federal employment during a government shutdown. Supreme Court grapples with future of Voting Rights Act in Louisiana case. The Supreme Court heard arguments on Wednesday concerning a Louisiana congressional district designed to ensure minority representation, highlighting a critical battle over the future of the Voting Rights Act. The case centers on a second majority black district created after the 2020 census, following a lower court's finding that the initial district likely violated the act. Justice Brett Kavanaugh played a central role, revisiting concerns he previously expressed regarding indefinite race-based remedies, suggesting they represent a most dangerous course. Chief Justice John Roberts attempted to distinguish the Louisiana case from a previous ruling concerning Alabama, indicating he did not view the prior precedent as controlling the current outcome. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson underscored the court's previous decision regarding Alabama, emphasizing the broader question of how courts should interpret the Voting Rights Act in redistricting. The justices debated the extent to which Congress's intent in enacting the act to combat racial discrimination in voting should guide the creation of majority-minority districts. The Trump administration proposed a standard requiring plaintiffs to demonstrate that voters were discriminated against based on race, a shift that critics argue would significantly weaken the act. Several justices, particularly the liberal wing, expressed alarm at the potential consequences of limiting the act's ability to address ongoing discriminatory practices. They emphasized that Louisiana's situation exemplified the need for continuous enforcement, citing the state's history of racial disparities in voting. The arguments mirrored a broader debate about race in American policy, echoing the Supreme Court's 2023 decision limiting affirmative action in college admissions. The justices questioned whether race-based districting could indefinitely remain a permissible tool for correcting past injustices. Ultimately, the court's decision will have profound implications for the future of voting rights and the ongoing effort to ensure equitable representation in the United States. The case represents a pivotal moment in the ongoing struggle to safeguard the fundamental right to vote. Chinese data breach allegations and political fallout. Recent news coverage centers around allegations of a significant data breach originating from China, alongside ongoing political fallout stemming from the collapse of a spy trial and a broader investigation into Whitehall security vulnerabilities. Dominic Cummings, formerly a senior advisor to Boris Johnson, claims that China accessed vast amounts of classified government information through compromised high-level systems, specifically referencing STRAP, material a highly sensitive government classification. Cummings asserts that the breach involved intelligence services and the National Security Secretariat within the Cabinet Office, indicating a serious compromise of national security. He alleges a cover-up occurred following his briefing in 2020, questioning the government's response. The Cabinet Office vehemently denies Cummings' claims, stating that the alleged breach did not occur and that no such investigation was undertaken by the National Cyber Security Center. Professor Ciaran Martin, a former chief executive of the National Cyber Security Center, similarly doubts the veracity of Cummings' assertions, emphasizing the fundamentally different architecture and security protocols of these systems, compared to typical internet-based systems. He highlights the absence of evidence supporting the claim. Meanwhile, the collapse of a spy trial involving 2 men accused of spying for China remains a central point of contention. The Crown Prosecution Service unexpectedly dropped charges, fueling suspicions of political interference. The allegations have intensified pressure on the current government to designate China as a national security threat, a move that has been hampered by the historical context of the alleged offenses under the previous conservative administration. Adding to the turmoil, a leaked memo reveals plans by Labour to reduce the affordable homes target in London, drawing criticism from housing experts. Furthermore, investigations into a First Brands Group and Tricolor Holdings collapse, coupled with allegations of erosion of lending standards, have shaken financial markets. Finally, a media personality's rape allegation and a reported breach of high-level systems add to the escalating drama. The ongoing narrative highlights concerns about national security, political interference, and the integrity of government processes. French PM Lecornu survives no-confidence votes amidst political turmoil. The French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu has successfully navigated 2 no-confidence votes within just 5 days of assuming office, highlighting the deep-seated political instability within France. Initially, a motion from the far-left party, La France Insoumise, narrowly missed ousting him, failing by only 18 votes. Subsequently, a second vote, involving the far right, was predictably unsuccessful. These votes underscore the fractured nature of the National Assembly, where no single party commands a majority, a situation replicated across the last 15 months. Lecornu's survival is largely attributable to concessions he made to the Socialist Party, including suspending controversial pension reforms and pledging not to utilize the constitutional device known as the 49-3, which bypasses a vote in Parliament. This decision effectively transferred control of the 2026 budget to the political parties, a significant shift reflecting the decline of presidential authority following Macron's parliamentary dissolution. The draft budget itself aims to reduce the deficit to 4.7% of GDP through $30 billion in savings, primarily targeting the health sector and local administration. But this has been met with strong criticism from the left and far right, who accuse the government of neglecting the needs of less affluent citizens. Socialist Party leader Olivier Faure has indicated his willingness to support a new censure motion if substantial changes are not made to the budget. Lecornu's predecessors, François Bayrou and Michel Barnier, also faced no-confidence votes, with Bayrou ousting himself and Barnier resigning after losing a vote in December 2024. The ongoing political turmoil reflects growing public disillusionment with the political process. The situation is further complicated by the fragmented composition of the National Assembly, consisting of a center-right bloc of under 200 MPs, a left-wing alliance of approximately the same size, and a far-right bloc of around 140 plus independents. Lecornu's immediate priorities include securing approval for the 2026 budget, a task made significantly more challenging by the lack of a stable parliamentary majority and the strong opposition to the proposed measures. The Prime Minister's future remains precarious, dependent on his ability to navigate the complex and deeply divided political landscape. Trump unveils plans for Arc de Trump Monument. President Donald Trump is spearheading a project to construct a triumphal arch across Trump from the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., commemorating the country's 250th anniversary next year. The initiative, dubbed the Arc de Trump, is being privately funded and is part of the broader America 250 celebrations. The design is inspired by Paris's Arc de Triomphe, and will be situated atop a grassy traffic circle between Arlington National Cemetery and the Lincoln Memorial. Several models of the arch, ranging in size from small to large, have been prominently displayed, initially on Trump's desk in the Oval Office and later at a White House fundraiser. The models were showcased to various delegations, including Finnish President Alexander Stubb and Canadian officials, generating significant media attention. Trump has repeatedly expressed his preference for the largest model. The project's design was developed by Harrison Design, and a watercolor rendering was recently shared on social media by Trump himself, effectively endorsing the plans. Architect Nicholas Leo Charbonneau of Harrison Design emphasized the monument's placement within the existing traffic circle. The initiative reflects Trump's broader efforts to reshape Washington, D.C., including the gilded makeover of the White House Rose Garden, the construction of a $250 million ballroom, and the clearing of homeless encampments. A senior White House official stated that Trump personally conceived the design and has been involved in every stage of the process. The project's funding mechanism remains unclear, though a source suggests that leftover funds from the ballroom expansion could be utilized. The lack of a triumphal arch in Washington, D.C., compared to other Western capitals, is cited as a key rationale for the project. Catesby Lay, a co-founder of the National Civic Art Society, has long advocated for a similar monument, suggesting a temporary structure that could eventually become permanent, referencing the Washington Arch in Manhattan. Furthermore, the project aligns with a recent executive order mandating that federal buildings embrace classical architecture, although the Arc de Triomphe itself won't be subject to those restrictions, but will follow the spirit of the executive order. Trump himself confirmed the monument's purpose as me. The project's timeline for construction is yet to be determined. Syria's Sharaa meets Putin in Moscow following Assad's fall. Following Bashar al-Assad's ouster 10 months prior, Syrian interim President Ahmed al-Sharaa held his first formal talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, marking a significant shift in geopolitical relations. The meeting underscored a pragmatic approach, prioritizing cooperation over past animosities stemming from Russia's support for Assad during the devastating Syrian civil war. Sharaa sought to re-establish Syria's international standing and secure vital assistance for the country's reconstruction and stability. A key focus of the discussions was Syria's relationship with Russia, with Sharaa emphasizing the need for continued access to the Tartus naval port and Hamamim military airbase, essential for Russia's strategic interests in the region. In return, Sharaa expressed a desire for Russian support in consolidating his power, securing Syria's borders, and addressing the country's economic challenges through access to energy and investment. The meeting also involved a request from Sharaa for the extradition of Assad to face trial for alleged war crimes, a demand deemed unlikely to be fulfilled by Russia, which granted Assad asylum, citing the risk of his family's physical elimination. Despite this, both leaders affirmed the importance of a special relationship between their countries, with Russia pledging to assist Syria in fulfilling agreements related to its territorial integrity and security. Furthermore, the talks addressed the ongoing humanitarian situation in Syria, with Russia offering to provide food and medical supplies, and to assist in repairing damaged infrastructure. The Syrian delegation also acknowledged shortcomings in the number of seats won by women at the recent parliamentary elections, a notable development amidst the country's transition. The meeting concluded with a shared commitment to fostering a stable and secure Syria, although underlying tensions and the complex legacy of the conflict remain. The exchange highlighted a new phase in Syria's future, contingent on the ability of both nations to navigate the challenges ahead. Raila Odinga, Kenya's iconic leader, dies at 80. Kenyan former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, aged 80, passed away in India on Wednesday while receiving medical treatment. He collapsed during a morning walk at a hospital in Devastation, approximately 50 km east of Kochi. President William Ruto paid tribute, describing Odinga as a beacon of courage and father of our democracy, declaring a 7-day period of mourning and a state funeral with full military honors. Thousands gathered at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to welcome his body after it was flown in from India, leading to a temporary suspension of flights due to overwhelming crowds. The public viewing was subsequently moved to Nairobi's Moi International Sports Center in the Kasarani neighborhood to accommodate the massive turnout. Odinga's life was marked by a fierce dedication to democratic reforms and a long career as Kenya's main opposition leader. He ran unsuccessfully for president 5 times, repeatedly alleging electoral fraud and manipulation. His legal challenges, culminating in the 2017 election annulment by the Supreme Court, significantly impacted Kenya's electoral processes. Despite these setbacks, Odinga maintained a passionate following, particularly within his Luo ethnic community and his stronghold in western Kenya. Following his death, security was heightened as large crowds attempted to access the viewing area, prompting police to fire shots and tear gas. Dignitaries, including President Ruto, were eventually able to observe the coffin. Odinga's legacy includes his role in brokering a power-sharing agreement after the 2007 crisis which prevented widespread violence. More recently, he joined President Ruto in a broad-based government after the 2022 elections. A stream of supporters, carrying traditional Luo mourning symbols like twigs and palm branches, waited to pay their respects. The funeral will be held at the Nyayo National Stadium in Nairobi on Friday, followed by transportation of his body to Kisumu, his political base, and finally, burial at his farm in Bondo, scheduled for Sunday. Odinga's death leaves a significant void in Kenyan politics, and his supporters continue to mourn the loss of a pivotal figure who shaped the nation's democratic trajectory. The family wishes to have the body laid to rest within 72 hours. Tensions escalate between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban. Recent days have witnessed a significant escalation of violence along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, marked by deadly clashes and reciprocal accusations between the Pakistani military and the Afghan Taliban. The conflict began with reports of Pakistani airstrikes targeting Kabul and Kandahar, followed by explosions within Kabul and Kandahar, which the Taliban blamed on Pakistani actions. These events shattered a fragile period of relative calm. Both sides engaged in fierce fighting, particularly in the Spin-Boldak border district, leading to casualties on both sides. The Pakistani military claimed to have killed between 15 and 20 Afghan Taliban fighters and inflicted injuries, while the Taliban government reported the deaths of numerous Pakistani soldiers. Intense clashes persisted for almost 5 hours in Spin-Boldak, involving drones and jets, resulting in injuries and the displacement of hundreds of families. The fighting has been accompanied by a concerted effort by both sides to shape public perception through social media, highlighting the extent of damage inflicted by their respective actions. The conflict's roots lie in long-standing accusations by Pakistan that the Afghan Taliban permits the Pakistani Taliban to operate from Afghan territory, aiming to establish a strict Islamic government. The Taliban consistently denies these allegations. International concern has grown, with China, Russia, and the United States calling for de-escalation. UN Special Rapporteur Richard Bennett expressed deep concern regarding civilian casualties and displacement, urging all parties to exercise restraint and adhere to international law. The clashes have resulted in confirmed deaths and injuries, as well as significant displacement of families, and the reported presence of drones and jets in the affected areas. The situation remains tense, with ongoing reports of further clashes and a continued struggle for control along the border. Zion Church crackdown signals escalating religious persecution in China. Recent arrests of 30 Christians, primarily linked to the Zion Church network, represent a significant escalation of China's ongoing crackdown on unregistered house churches. The arrests, spanning at least 10 cities, including Beijing and Shanghai, mark the largest such roundup in decades and signal a heightened level of government pressure on religious groups operating outside state control. Key figures, including prominent pastor Jin Mingri, were detained on charges including illegal use of information networks, with many still held in Baihai No. 2 prison. The Zion Church, known for its outspokenness, has become a focal point for government scrutiny, prompting fears of a broader, systematic crackdown on unregistered churches across the country. Authorities have implemented a range of tactics, including the imposition of strict regulations on online religious activities, exemplified by a new online code of conduct requiring licenses for sermons. Previous actions such as demolishing church buildings and removing crosses, coupled with convictions for fraud and economic crimes against church members, have created an environment of intimidation. Christian advocacy groups, such as Luke Alliance and Open Doors, predict this is just the beginning, with other underground churches preparing for similar arrests. The coordinated nature of the Zion Church operation, coupled with the government's targeting of well-known and organized groups, suggests a strategy of killing the chicken to scare the monkeys. The Chinese government maintains that citizens enjoy freedom of religious belief within legal frameworks, but simultaneously insists that all religious activities must comply with Chinese laws and regulations. Despite official figures claiming 38 million Protestants and 6 million Catholics, estimates suggest tens of millions more attend unregistered churches. The U.S. government has condemned the arrests, further complicating the situation. The ongoing crackdown underscores a persistent tension between religious freedom and the Chinese Communist Party's desire for control. The situation remains volatile, with significant implications for the future of religious practice in China. The digest Sudan's children caught in a war's devastation. The ongoing civil war in Sudan is inflicting immense suffering, primarily on its children, with widespread malnutrition, displacement, and trauma. Hospitals like Bashir Hospital in Khartoum are overwhelmed, struggling to provide basic care due to a severe lack of resources and funding. Tuma's heartbreaking story exemplifies this crisis, where she faced the impossible choice of providing for one of her twin daughters, Masajid, with limited antibiotics. The conflict, ignited by clashes between the army and the Rapid Support Forces (RSF), has resulted in widespread destruction, displacing families and disrupting education. Numerous children, like Zahar and Ahmed, are grappling with the devastating consequences of the war. Zahar, severely injured after a drone strike, requires amputation of his legs and relies on the kindness of volunteers, who provide him with education and care. Ahmed, who works clearing debris from destroyed fun fairs and playgrounds, has discovered human remains, highlighting the pervasive violence. He earns a meager income, supporting his family, and is haunted by the loss of his brothers. Many children, including Ahmed, have lost contact with their families, further compounding the trauma. The disruption of schools has created a critical educational deficit, impacting the future prospects of countless young Sudanese. Despite the overwhelming challenges, the resilience of children like Zahir, who continues to pursue his passion for football despite his physical limitations, offers a glimmer of hope. The situation is exacerbated by food shortages and the psychological impact of witnessing violence. Volunteers and educators are working tirelessly to provide support and maintain a sense of normalcy for these traumatized children, while the urgent need for humanitarian aid remains critical. The future of Sudan's children hangs in the balance, dependent on the resolution of the conflict and sustained international support. The stories of Zahir, Ahmed and Tuma represent a collective plea for a peaceful resolution and a future where children can simply be children. Trump tariffs trigger sharp decline in Indian exports to the U.S., and India's exports to the United States have experienced a dramatic decline following the imposition of 50% tariffs by the Trump administration, significantly impacting key sectors and widening India's trade deficit. September witnessed a 20% drop in goods exports to the U.S., with a nearly 40% decrease over the preceding 4 months, totaling a reduction from $8.8 billion to $5.5 billion. The tariffs, initiated on August 27th, have disproportionately affected labor-intensive industries including textiles, gems and jewelry, engineering goods, and chemicals. The Global Trade Research Initiative (GTRI) highlighted the severity of the impact, noting that the U.S. has become India's most severely affected market since the tariff escalation began. This decline has contributed to a 13-month high trade deficit of $32.15 billion in September. While trade with countries like the UAE and China has partially offset the losses, the impact on the U.S. market remains substantial. Negotiations between India and the U.S. are ongoing, with an Indian delegation currently in the U.S. for talks aimed at concluding a trade agreement by next month. A key element of these discussions involves India's agreement to cease buying Russian oil, a concession sought by the U.S. to exert economic pressure on Russia concerning the war in Ukraine. Despite this agreement, significant trade sticking points persist, particularly concerning access to India's agricultural sector, which Washington has long sought to open. Historically, India and the U.S. were major trading partners, with bilateral trade reaching $190 billion in 2024. Prime Minister Modi and President Trump have set an ambitious goal to increase this trade to $500 billion. The ongoing trade negotiations represent a critical juncture for both economies, with the future of their trade relationship heavily influenced by the resolution of these outstanding issues. The situation underscores the complex geopolitical and economic dynamics shaping global trade patterns.